Welcome to your Essential Business Briefing. I'm Kate Moody. Coming up, as more Ukrainians flee the war, European governments try to meet the initial cost of supporting those refugees, billions of dollars this year alone. How does a refugee crisis impact a host economy? We look at the immediate and longer-term implications for social services, public finances, and the labor force. And we'll speak to the founder of a group that's giving women at the Jerash Camp in Jordan a fresh start through embroidery. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has sparked a humanitarian and economic crisis and forced many families to flee their homes. The United Nations says more than 4 million Ukrainian refugees have left the country. Millions more are displaced within its borders. It's Europe's fastest-growing refugee crisis since the Second World War, and one that will cost at least $30 billion this year alone. That's according to the Center for Global Development, which says the short-term costs include administrative work, as well as transportation, housing, and food. Well, let's speak now to Emmanuelle Auriol, professor of economics at the Toulouse School of Economics. Thanks for being with us today. A refugee crisis like the one we're seeing from Ukraine is first and foremost a humanitarian issue, but it also does put a lot of pressure on local economies. What do we know about the kind of funding that's needed in those initial stages of such a crisis?
Well, of course, you need funded from the national government very often. This is coming from the general budget, but also from local government, because you need to host these people, to feed them. So, for instance, during the refugee crisis of the Syrian, we estimate that 0.1 percentage point of the PIB of the European Union was invested in helping these people to settle down. However, studies show that in the long run or medium run even, this cost is quickly recouped by the contribution of refugees to the economic system.
And we know that a lot of that money does come from national and local governments. There are also big donations. The World Bank and the IMF announced these large sums of money. How is that organized?
And also the European Union. We have the European Civil Protection and Humanitarian Aid Operation, and they contribute a lot to manage a crisis in the world, and especially in Europe. And so in this particular case, for instance, they had Poland to host half of the refugees that are arriving from Ukraine right now. So you need a lot of coordination when you have humanitarian aid. And I must say that in the particular case of Poland, this runs very smoothly. They are very efficient. Also, there are a lot of contribution by people, by regular people that host refugees at their home, that contribute with in kind or money. So there is a huge movement of solidarity throughout Europe, especially in Poland.
So there's the immediate emergency crisis phase, which is really what we're seeing now with Ukraine. Tell us a bit about the longer-term impact of integrating refugees into a society, into a labor force. Research suggests that the overall impact tends to be positive on an economy.
Exactly, and that might be a surprise to most listeners. I mean, those who are at least never study economics. But if you remember, in 2021, the Nobel Prize of Economics was allotted to David Card. And the reason why he got the Nobel Prize was precisely for his work on refugee crisis. It was from Cuba. As a refugee from Cuba reached Miami, the shock represented 7% of the population of Miami. And what he showed, which is very counterintuitive, is that in the long run, the city of Miami, long run means like 6 months, 1 year, the city of Miami did better than comparable cities that didn't had to absorb refugees during this period. And the reason is that such a shock means what? First of all, it means that these people need to consume clothes, food, lodging. So it's a bit like a Keynesian relance. You just or boost. You give money to these people, but they spend it right away in your economic system. So this helps the economy to grow. And then the refugees, they start to work. They need to find a job, and they contribute to the economic system. So what is key for the benefit that a refugee can bring to a country is indeed the fact that they can integrate the labor market. This is one very important aspect. And in Poland right now, you get the the paper very quickly. If you have, for instance, a biometric passport, you are allowed to work right away and to apply to many social services. So the rapidity of the ability of the refugee to work is very important. It's also important because then they understand that they can settle there, and so they learn the language. One big barrier to be productive is not to speak the language. And if you have a lot of uncertainty about what is going to happen to you, of course, you don't invest in a new language.
And it's worth pointing out that there is a real difference from an economic point of view between a refugee crisis and the issue of integrating immigrants into an economy or into a workforce.
Yes, because economic migrants, they come in general because there is a pull factor. So either they come because they want to study, so they are students, or they come because they are job to be filled and they want to work. So these are the main driver of economic immigration. And in this sense, and of course, it's a choice. I decide to go, for instance, in the UK rather than in Germany, or in Germany rather in Spain. It's a choice. And I make this choice based on my skills, including my ability to speak the language. Refugees is very different. They are just fleeing a zone of conflict. They didn't choose to flee. They have to save their life. And because of that, they are traumatized, and usually they didn't prepare their migration very well. However, I want to stress that refugees are what we call in economics positively selected. What does it mean? It means that those who reach advanced economy typically are the most educated and the wealthiest, because you need information, you need money in general to move around, to settle elsewhere. And so those who are the most mobile are the most educated and the most wealthiest.
Emmanuelle Auriol from the Toulouse School of Economics, thanks so much for joining us today. The Jerash Camp in northern Jordan is home to more than 50,000 Palestinian refugees. Many families have been there for generations. Since 2013, the Social Enterprise Project has trained and employed hundreds of women there to handcraft clothes and accessories with intricate embroidery. Its luxury products are now sold around the world. Roberta Ventura is the founder and chief executive of CEP, and she joins us now. Roberta, tell us about how your company came to be and what its mission is.
CEP stands for Social Enterprise Project. We started off as a project, hoping to become one day a brand, which is what we are now. That was 8 years ago. And we were started with a mission to bring thousands of refugees above the poverty line, thanks to their own skill and talent.
And you've found a real niche now in the luxury fashion industry.
Right. It was very important for us to develop a product which had a space in the luxury sector because it would be very hard to bring thousands of refugees above the poverty line unless the product was of exceptionally high quality.
So your products are manufactured in Italy and then finished in the Jerash Camp?
That is correct. Most of our products are made in Italy by suppliers to the big brands. And then we ship them to the camp, and the value added really starts then when they hit the camp, because that's where hundreds of CEP embroiderers create their wonders by hand embroidering those pieces and making them each into a unique creation.
And we're seeing a growing trend now within the fashion industry. Brands and consumers are focusing much more on their environmental and social impact.
You're right. Milan Fashion Week organizers, Camera della Moda, invited us this year in Milan for the first time ever. And this was the first time they actually dedicated a whole area to the social impact of fashion. As we all know, the impact of fashion on the planet has been at the forefront of the news for a while, which is great. But the impact on people, so the social impact of fashion, has actually just started to become a relevant subject, thankfully.
And it's also perhaps worth noting that CEP is led and largely powered by women.
Yes, we work with over 500 artists who happen to be refugees, and they're all women. The team in Jerash Camp is mostly made up of women. So we have some exceptions, but it so happens to be, yeah.
So your initial goal is to help these women and their families live above the poverty line. What about their medium to longer term prospects? Are your artists able to continue this work if and when they leave the camp?
It is a very good point. The whole set model has been designed in such a way that should the refugees leave the camp, where they have now been for generations, but should they be able to leave the camp, they can bring this skill set and this talent along with them, and they can keep being a SEP artist wherever they may be.
How can other businesses or industries foster the talent of refugees while still protecting them in what is a very vulnerable situation?
I hope many more businesses will. There are organizations, and there have been since we started, trying to do similar things. This is one of the reasons why it was important for us to become a certified B Corporation too. The B in B Corporation stands for benefit. So this is certification that shows that for us, people and planet have the same importance as profit. Now, this is a growing movement worldwide. So eventually, we hope there'll be other B corporations or not, but yeah, I would see B corporations as leading in this field, who decide to work with refugees just as with any other active economic agents and stop looking at them as pure recipients of aid, which is really what things should, the way things should develop and evolve over the years, once the refugee has been a refugee for years.
Roberta Ventura, thank you so much for joining us on France 24 today. Well, that's all for this week, but you'll find this and our previous programs on our website and as a podcast wherever you usually listen. You can also get in touch with your comments and questions on social media. Until next time, thanks for watching.
Join us every day here on France 24 for the last stretch of the presidential race, the mother of all election, the presidential election. This is the time for the French to choose their president. We'll have all our special envoys on the campaign trail across the globe, the latest analysis, the best polls. Join us here on France 24.
France 2022, the campaign on France 24 and France24.com.
Because a new page of history gets written every day. Because breaking news can't wait. Information everywhere. In all situations. On every subject. Understanding the world. Imagining the world. France 24. A different take on the news.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.